Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Osborne, founder of Gluten-Free Society, and I'm here in the manufacturing plant where all my products are made. I wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes tour to show you how we make my products so you can be as confident as I am that they are safe, powerful, and effective. In step one, when a raw material ingredient arrives at the facility, we first need to make sure it really is what our supplier says it is. For instance, if we ordered magnesium, we test to verify that that's what they shipped. Then we further test to ensure it has zero issues with harmful bacteria or heavy metal levels. Why do we do this? I want proof from the start that you're getting clean, safe ingredients. This step exceeds industry standards, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Then comes step two. Once all the raw materials pass this first step of quality control, they're weighed individually so the right ingredients and the right amounts end up in your supplements. They're blended in specialized machinery to make sure you get the same product each and every time. During step three, the product is packaged and goes to the lab for its final round of testing. In this stage, we confirm that what's on the label is in the product and retest to ensure nothing unexpected has snuck in. Testing before, during, and after might seem redundant to you, but we want to be absolutely certain you can trust these products. By the way, if you get your supplements somewhere else, there's a chance they may not have been tested at all. I use these products in my clinic, I use them myself, I use them with my friends and family and loved ones, and most importantly, I share them with you, knowing you'll see powerful results in your own health. And as always, we want to make sure you have access to high quality, gluten-free products so that when you're looking for supplements to take, you don't have to worry about cross-contamination issues that could make you sick. Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Got a great Q&A for you today. If you've got questions, nutritional questions you'd like to ask me, make sure you go ahead and start typing those into the feed now. As always, if you're not, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. Help us get this information out there. If you missed our show on Tuesday, I'm going to be taking questions about glyphosate today, the toxic pesticide and chemical that we have unfortunately used in mass in our farming industry. And so if you missed our interview with Dr. Stephanie Seneff of MIT, go back and check that video out. We'll put a link down below here for you if you've missed it. It's a must watch, something you're going to absolutely want to see. So, all right, let's dive into your questions. Is there some kind of quick test for glyphosate, test strips, or something easily available to the public? Marnie wants to know. No, not quick and not cheap. You can test for glyphosate, and there certainly are tests that can measure whether or not you're being exposed to glyphosate. There are labs that can measure whether or not there's glyphosate in products that you're buying, but the cost to do this on everything makes it pretty much out of reach for the average person, and even for the unaverage person, it would get super expensive. Unfortunately, maybe in the future we'll see some test strips come out. We can actually, in my practice, we commonly test for glyphosate exposure, but that test is several $100s, and just to see if you're being exposed to it. And then we also test to see whether or not people are having immune reactions to glyphosate, but beyond that, no simple quick one, not yet. Let's see, isn't it predictably in all of the biofuels that are made from sprayed crops like corn and soy? Yeah, so your biofuels, that's a great point. And I've actually talked with Dr. Seneff about this as well. You know, we use these biodiesels, these biofuels that are derived from genetically modified corn. The vast majority of them are anyway. And so the question is, and we don't have an answer for this, by the way, we don't know, but
Does putting a fuel in your vehicle that has been produced by glyphosate sprayed GMO crops lead to glyphosate residue in the air through the exhaust of the burning of that fuel? And I don't think we have an answer to that question. Nobody's really studied it. But it's kind of a frightening thought. Let's see here. Can zeolites and other detox methods remove glyphosate from the body? I've used zeolites. My favorite things to use for detoxification in that regard is I have a product called Mycobinder Plus, and it's got zeolite and granular activated carbon and fulvic acid in it to help replenish the minerals that are potentially being pulled. If you're looking to do some detoxification, that might be something you want to look into. Mycobinder Plus. I'll put a link for you. If people grow organic, what happens when it rains on the crops? There could be some glyphosate in the rain, and if you're trying to grow organically, is it possible that you get some on your farm? Yeah, it's possible, but you're not directly spraying it. So we can only do what we can do. I think the takeaway with it is, ideally, yes, it would be best to grow your own food or to be a part of a community where food is being grown in like a cooperation fashion, where there's a co-op and there's a community farm that's, not being sprayed directly with these toxic compounds. I don't think you're going to prevent other, mass scale production farms from stopping the use of these chemicals, at least not anytime soon. How long does glyphosate stay in the soil? It varies. I think some studies show that it takes up to a decade to really start to break down and deteriorate. So not good. I know that to certify a farm organically, you have to have a 7-year period where no pesticides or other chemicals are being used on your soil. So just to certify the land to become an organic farm, it takes 7 years. That's the legality behind it. Best way to detoxify from glyphosate, here's my opinion on detoxification from glyphosate. Number one is don't purposefully ever eat it. Number two is if you're trying to actually up-regulate your liver's ability to help you detoxify, then there are 4 excretion routes for detoxification that you can work on enhancing. Number one is urination. We get rid of a lot of toxins through the urine. And so making sure you're drinking adequate water, not being dehydrated. It's when we get dehydrated and we don't have adequate water that we take away the ability to eliminate toxins through the kidneys in the urine. So make sure you're staying super well hydrated. Number two, make sure that you don't get constipated. If you're constipated, a lot of these toxins are expelled from the liver into the GI tract where we poop them out. And so if you're constipated, then what ends up happening is those toxins stay in you a lot longer and can create more problems. So if you've got bowel issues, make sure that you figure out why that's happening, resolve that. You should be having bowel movements 1 to 2 times a day. Number 3 is sweat, everyday sweat. We live in this sedentary society where people have forgotten that sweating, the inconvenience of sweating is a deterrent, right? So a lot of people don't want to go outside, or they don't want to go when it's hot because they don't want to sweat. And I would argue that by not sweating, you're reducing your capacity to eliminate toxins through your skin, but there are also other benefits to sweating. And so you can enhance your sweating with exercise. It's hard to do. It's hard to sweat when you're exercising in a gym that has, big air blowers running and air conditioners running. So I always like to work out in gyms that don't have air conditioners to get that full sweat, or you could work out outside. Just don't do it in the heat of the day, especially if you're prone to heat overreactions. But infrared is another really great option for enhancing your sweating capacity. So there are a number of different options for infrared. Personally, I have an infrared sauna, and I like to get in that infrared sauna, if not every day, most days of the week. It's not a requirement, it's not a necessity, but again, it's a great way to detox and to use infrared. I also have a platinum LED infrared light box, which can be very, very effective and very helpful post-workout for recovery, but also can help with healing and can help with detoxification through the skin. So those are great options. And then as far as supplementation is concerned, there are a number of different things that can help, but one of the best tried and true is glutathione and N-acetylcysteine. So there are different kinds of glutathione. We have something called ultra-glutathione, which is an amino acid bound glutathione that is absorbed better because glutathione is not absorbed by the GI tract very effectively. But so you could try that, ultra-glutathione. We also have something called NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which is a precursor to glutathione, which also helps the body produce glutathione. It's a precursor to glutathione production. And then there are a variety of other things that just help support detoxification: vitamin C, selenium, vitamin E, to name a few nutrients that are very important. And then there are a number of herbals like milk thistle is a good option for the liver. I have a product called Ultra Liver Detox if you're looking for just a combination product to help support phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification pathways. For someone with confirmed hypercalcemia, what's the best and preferred dose per day of chelated magnesium to take before after meals? It's not that there's a best dose. I would say, if you have hypercalcemia, the bigger question to ask is, why do you have hypercalcemia? A lot of times people that have hypercalcemia, which is excessive calcium in their blood, it's because they got a parathyroid problem or they have a vitamin D deficiency, and so they're breaking down their bone to access calcium, to push that calcium into the blood, and so too much is coming into the blood. So backtrack. Instead of just taking magnesium to try to offset the calcium, ask a deeper question. Why is the calcium high in the blood? Is it okay to eat organic tofu, or is there still glyphosate contamination? That I would say depend on the tofu that you're buying. The best way to go about doing that, Penny, would be to call the company that's producing that organic tofu and ask them, do you test for glyphosate? Is that part of your you're obviously producing an organic product, so you value health, but are you doing testing to make sure that there's no glyphosate in your end result product? And I think that that's the only way you're really truly going to know outside of testing it yourself. Now, as far as eating organic tofu, I'm not a big fan of eating soy if you're trying to follow the no grain, no pain diet. And there are a number of different reasons as to why that is the case. But if you're not following no grain, no pain, and you're using, tofu as part of your diet, you definitely want to make sure it's organic and, again, ask the company. Can the daily intake of levothyroxine itself cause nutritional deficiencies, given that it does not contain any grain as fillers? It can if you're overdosing. So Mario, and I see this a lot in practice where people their endocrinologist or their other doctor has diagnosed them with a Hashimoto's or a hypothyroid situation, and they've got them on levothyroxine, and they've been on it for years, and their doctors don't monitor their blood work very well. And so what ends up happening is, we find it by accident a lot of the times when we'll measure their TSH, their T3, their T4, we'll find their TSH is almost non-existent, meaning when TSH is low, and you're on thyroid medication, when it's too low, it's an indication that you're possibly being over-medicated. And so if you're taking too much thyroid hormone, there are a lot of consequences nutritionally because, it's just like the status of hyperthyroidism. When people start losing weight and people start losing hair and their eyes are bulging out of their head and they're feeling terrible, it's because if you have too much thyroid, you rev up metabolic function too high. Therefore, you're going to start burning through your nutrients a lot faster. So it is possible for too much levothyroxine to create malnutrition or nutritional deficits. It's important if you're using that kind of medication to get with your doctor and to make sure that you are monitoring it. And if your TSH is consistently below 0.5, then there's a strong likelihood that you're being over-medicated with that thyroid medication. And so that's your cue to talk to your doctor about that possibility and maybe make a dose adjustment. So Virginia's asking what causes hangnails. A lot of different things can cause hangnails beyond trauma. So if we're talking about non-traumatic hangnails, right? Because you can jam your nail into something and you can tear it. But typically it's mineral deficiency. Selenium, zinc are common to see in people that have recurring hangnails. We also see people that have calcium deficiencies as well, that where they're going to get hangnails. Protein deficiency is another common one. Selenium. So those are things you could look at, making sure you're eating enough of if you're having frequent recurrent hangnails. Is there a way to check how healthy your mitochondria are? There's not a way, per se, to check the health of the mitochondria. There's not like one definitive test. So you say that the mitochondria are healthy because this test is normal. The best way, in my opinion, to check it, and I keep saying this, we're getting ready to roll out our nutritional testing, and it's where we use a technology that is an intracellular technology based on mitochondrial function. So in my opinion, if you're after, does my mitochondria have what they need to properly perform, nutritionally speaking, that, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to do it. It's basically intracellular mitochondrial function outcome testing for nutrients. What is happening with the shower? How much water enters the body from a shower? Is the poison dangerous through a shower? So I've never read any research on how much water actually enters the body through a shower. I'd say there are a number of different variable factors there. One of those factors would be, how hot the shower is, because I would say most of the water entering the body through the shower would be through the steam inhalation. So if you're taking a really hot shower and you're breathing in the steam, then that directly is being inhaled into your body. Your skin provides a layer of protection, or a barrier, so to speak, but that doesn't mean that the chemicals in the water cannot be absorbed by the skin when you're showering. I don't think there's an exact scientific way to answer that question. Is organic corn and rice free of glyphosate? It's interesting. It should be, technically. You would think it would be. But without actually doing testing on it, it would be hard to say. And the reason I say that is that the wine industry, there was a number of years ago, somebody was taking different wines that were grown organically and then measuring the glyphosate content of these wines, and found that a lot of these wines were actually, even though they were organic, were contaminated with glyphosate. So, theoretically, organic corn and rice should be free of glyphosate. But, actuality, maybe that's not 100% true. Hard to say. Yeah, again, questions coming up a lot about, are there supplements that I should take, to help my body rid itself of these things? I would say, if you're looking for kind of my take on best of the best for detoxification, Ultra Liver Detox would be one supplement that I would recommend first, absolutely. Number 2 would be Mycobinder Plus, and then number 3 would be Detox C, the vitamin C. And so using those 3 in tandem or together would be a great place to support, or great place to start supporting your detoxification. And so starting there first. And by the way, those of you watching, this week is our biggest sale of the year. I did mention this at the start of the show. Memorial Day, and all those veterans out there watching, thank you for your service. Do we have a code on that?
I do not have it, but I'll find it out.
We're going to get that code for you guys, because it's our 20% off sale. And so if you're looking to get you some premium quality gluten grain-free supplement options, I highly encourage you to check out our product line at glutenfreesociety.org. And that's the way you can support us too. That's the way you can support the show and support what we do. We'll get that code to you here shortly. Do you think cotton balls from removing makeup bought at the drugstore contaminated with glyphosate? Yeah, most of your cotton crops are sprayed. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see that be the case. Organic, in my opinion, there is the way to go. Yeah, so another question about what's the best way to go about detoxification of glyphosate. We probably ought to just do a whole protocol on that and publish that for folks. But again, Ultra Liver Detox, Mycobinder Plus combined with Detox C would be where I would start someone, especially if you've had some testing done in your high glyphosate, and then get it retested and checked to make sure that that glyphosate level's coming down. And of course, the number one rule to any detox is don't retox. So if you're trying to get it out of you, you can't keep getting it in you. So you've got to control your environmental exposure the best that you can. It's a good question. Macy says, if I get sick from all grain and potatoes in the U.S. but can eat imported groceries from Italy that contain soy, corn, wheat, no problem, is it glyphosate sensitivity and not a grain sensitivity? It's possible, Macy. Without doing testing, it's hard to say. I mean, if you tolerate them better, there's a lot of reasons why people might tolerate. This comes up a lot. People say, I tolerate things if I'm in Europe, I tolerate them better. And this is depending on where you're at in Europe too, because like the UK uses glyphosate, and so that's a misnomer that a lot of people aren't aware of. Is that if you're going to the UK, like United Kingdom, you're going to get glyphosate there in your standard products. Italy's less, but they're using more and more. I mean, they're actually rolling that stuff out in that country more and more. So be careful would be my point there. And then number two is you can be gluten sensitive and react less to a product maybe like from Italy, but still react to it, just not react as aggressively. I've seen that be the case for a number of people, a number of my own patients, where they'll go on vacation and cheat on their gluten-free diets, and they won't feel as bad as they do if they were eating the gluten over here. And probably has a lot to do with the quantity of pesticides, because remember, I didn't write the book No Gluten, No Pain. I wrote the book No Grain, No Pain. And so grain comes with a lot of things beyond gluten. Certainly gluten is an issue for many people, but then there's glyphosate, and then there's mold and mycotoxins. There's the fact that grain is very, very high omega-6, and so promotes an inflammatory fatty acid cascade in the body, so it promotes inflammation. There's the fact that many grains contain toxic heavy metals like arsenic, cadmium, and lead. And so there's more than just gluten to grain. And so you may be less reactive or not as reactive or not finding yourself openly reactive when you're overseas eating something or ordering something from overseas. But there's also something called silent celiac disease or silent gluten sensitivity, which is where it does cause damage. The damage is just a low level of poison, low level of inflammation. It doesn't cause an acute flare, but it leads to and contributes to chronic inflammation and autoimmune disease. So I would just say, if you're trying to figure out whether or not you're gluten sensitive or whether or not you're glyphosate sensitive, I would encourage you to get genetically tested for gluten, because if your genes are positive, then no matter what your reaction is to European versus US, I would still encourage you to avoid grain altogether if you were gluten sensitive genetically. What can be the cause of eczema other than grain, and what's the best strategy to get rid of eczema? So we have an entire show on skin problems, Alla. We'll put a link below for you, and you can go check that out. But a lot of things can cause eczema. I mean, yeast overgrowth is a notorious trigger for eczema. Other food reactions or food sensitivities can cause or contribute to eczema. Zinc deficiency can contribute to it. Biotin deficiency, which is a B vitamin. Other B vitamin deficiencies beyond biotin can contribute to it, like B1 and vitamin B3 deficiency. So a lot of different things can contribute to eczema or cause it. Elise says, love the new shirt design. Yeah, my team put this together. We got a new shirt. And by the way, we're giving away a bunch of these shirts during our Memorial Day sale this week. So from today to Monday, if you use code MEM20, MEM20, MEM short for Memorial, MEM20, they'll save 20% off your order. And I don't know, I think they have a limit or a cap if you order. I don't quote me on this. You could talk to my staff, but I think it's if you order $500 or more, they'll put a free shirt in your order for you. So thanks for your commentary, Lisa. What's the best way to detox? It's another one. So I think I've answered this one a number of times. A lot of you have asked what's the best way to detox. 3 things: Mycobinder Plus, Ultra Liver Detox, and Detox C. Combined, all 3 of those combined. And as far as capsule counts, so we might as well get into that because that will be the next question. So with vitamin C, with the Detox C, it's 5 grams a day. With the Ultra Liver Detox, it's 4 capsules a day. And with the Mycobinder Plus, it's 4 capsules a day taken on an empty stomach. So 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, empty stomach. That's an hour away from food, before or after, an hour away from food. Those 3 things would be what I would, again, encourage you to use to support your detoxification. Can I take chickpeas in an autoimmune condition? So if you're following no grain, no pain, chickpeas in phase 2 is not something I would recommend that you do. Again, that's just generalized advice, but if you're worried about whether or not you're reactive to chickpea, I would encourage you to get tested. What are my thoughts on MSM for self? I don't know what you mean by MSM for self. You mean me taking it for yourself? MSM, depending on what's the indication that you want to use it for. MSM can be very helpful and effective for pain and inflammation, but be more clear and I can give you a clearer answer. So how can I get a gluten-free warrior t-shirt? I think I just announced that, didn't I? So yeah, so get your order in for the Memorial Day sale. That's how you can get your shirt. We don't sell them. So we just give them away to our great customers. So having bad neck pain, I've seen a few chiropractors, MRI shows spurs, doctor says PRP treatment. How can this help? If you're having bad neck pain, if your MRI shows spurs and that's it, depending on your age, a lot of MRIs are going to show spurs or X-rays are going to show spurs. The DMR, number of follow-up questions to that question, because it's hard for me to give you good information. But if you have herniation, or if you have disc impingement, or if you have a disc that's sitting on a nerve root, or if you have the posterior disc is impinging on what's called the thecal sac, which is the back half of your spinal cord, that can be problematic, and PRP may or may not be helpful for that. Now, PRP can be helpful for neck pain, but if the theory is that the spurs are causing the pain, the PRP is not going to stop the spurs. And so your best route of care, if the spurs are what are causing or driving the pain, then you really probably need some postural correction and postural exercises to take the pressure off that area of the spine where those spurs are forming. And that's one of those things that takes time. So like cervical extension devices can be very, very helpful for that. Chiropractic care, I don't know when you get that, if you've been to several chiropractors and if you get treatment, does that treatment relieve your pain even if it's temporary? Again, those are all things that are things to think about as to whether or not, what you should do next. But PRP maybe and maybe not. I'm not opposed to PRP. I think it can work phenomenally well for some people. But the question I would ask your doctor is, okay, beyond PRP, where's the pain coming from? So get their opinion about where's the pain coming from, why does the pain exist, so that you can understand what you need to do beyond PRP to make sure it doesn't come back. Because a lot of people will get treatments that have anti-inflammatory benefits or effects, and the pain will go away for a time, but then it will come back if you don't resolve why the pain happened. Okay, so yeah, more questions, the same questions about how do I get glyphosate out of my body. So, again, I think I've said that enough. So Donna's asking, what about water filtration that takes it out of your drinking water? No, we're still working on a solution, or on a scientific answer. I have theories on what will take it out of your drinking water, but not tested theories. So, I don't want to say, hey, go spend a bunch of money on a particular kind of filter without being able to honestly give you an answer that's been scientifically validated. Are the cancer registries accurate and effective at tracking cancer related to glyphosate? No, absolutely not. And it's not the cancer registries so much as it's the ignorant doctors. So, we have this entire system, thousands and thousands of doctors and oncologists that refuse to look at diet and lifestyle as a contributing factor to cancer, even though the science is very clear on this issue. And I don't think you're ever going to get active and accurate associations or causal relationships when doctors refuse or gaslight their patients into saying, oh, that's not a big deal. I mean, how many times have you seen somebody who you knew with cancer, or maybe some of you have had cancer and experienced this, where the doctor says, yeah, just keep your weight on, eat ho-hos and Twinkies and ice cream, right? Genetically modified foods full of glyphosate, and the doctor's saying, yeah, eat those things. It doesn't matter what you eat, just keep your calories up so you don't lose weight so that we can poison you with chemotherapy. Like that, until that attitude changes in medicine, there won't be any accurate tracking ever. And so it's up to you as a unique person. It's up to you as the consumer in your life to protect yourself, because your doctor's certainly not going to do it, and they're certainly not going to give you great advice around it. At least most won't. I'm not saying all aren't, but most. Supplements to help support anxiety. Probably one of the simplest. We have something, Lily, called Ultra Calm, CALM. And it's got a mixture of different things in it that will support you in that endeavor, and that's where I would start. In the UK, corn is considered gluten-free. Even organic gluten-free flour has corn flour. I find this confusing. Is organic corn okay in flour? No. Corn has gluten in it, period. Now, I know that the label says gluten-free, but you have to understand that the labeling laws refer to a type of gluten called gliadin. Gliadin is found predominantly in wheat. Really, it's gliadin, hordein, which is a type of gluten found in barley. And then there's, do we have our diagram of the different kinds of glutens and the different kinds of grains? And I think maybe if we put that up there for Susan, that that will be helpful for her. But the name of the corn gluten is called Zein, Z-E-I-N. And, although technically they'll tell you it's gluten-free, and the food labeling laws will allow it to be labeled gluten-free, corn gluten has been studied in celiac patients, and some research is showing that corn gluten is actually more detrimental and more damaging to celiacs than is wheat gluten. And that's why we talk about that. So don't get confused. The food labeling laws are not your friend as it comes to gluten, because they leave out corn and rice and other grains that very well can cause and can continue to contribute to the inflammatory process in those with gluten issues. Remember, 92%, and this has been studied a number of times, this number I give you, 92%, there are several studies that show it's 90+% of patients going on a gluten-free diet fail to achieve remission of their inflammation measured biochemically on the traditional gluten-free diet. That's the wheat, barley, and rye-free diet. And so why is that? It's because they're buying all these gluten-free substitute products that are technically not gluten-free and that are allowing them to continue to have inflammation. Now, many people go wheat, barley, and rye free and feel better. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't feel better, but different glutens react in different ways in different people. And if you're trying to truly be gluten-free, the only way you can ever really achieve that or accomplish that is to be grain-free. I'm not sure I understand this question. How do we know if a food is truly pesticide-free if it can make its own pesticides? If it's GMO and the label says organic, but not organic, non-GMO. So by default, organic means non-GMO, just FYI. There's only one exception to that I'm aware of, and that's with canola oil. Canola oil is genetically modified rapeseed, and they changed the name from rapeseed oil to canola oil because the name of the company that started this nonsense is the Canadian Oil Company, and that's where canola, the name canola, is kind of a short for Canadian oil. So canola is the only product that I've ever seen, it's a seed oil that's labeled organic, because they take a genetically modified canola rapeseed and they grow it without pesticide, but it's still a GMO product. But beyond that, as far as I know, maybe somebody else out there is a better expert on this than I am, but as far as I know, if a product is labeled organic by default, that product is non-GMO. Is it true that vitamin D and vitamin K need to be taken separately because they compete on the same receptors and cancel out the best? No, it's not true that they need to be taken separately. You eat, a lot of the foods that people eat contain both. And so your body's going to be able to absorb them both. Now, if you're taking massive doses of one over the other, then you may, over time, if you're doing that over long periods of time without justification, without lab testing, then you may end up creating some problems. But as a general rule, no, you can take them together. Why can't I find organic pork? I don't know. Maybe you're looking in the wrong place. I know we've got several organic pork growers down in my neck of the woods. If you're in Houston, in the Houston area, there's a farm out here called Yonder Way Farms, and they do a great job of free-range pork. There's also up in Virginia, there's a great farm called Polyface Farm, and I think they do ship. I don't know how far they ship from their farm, but they have organic free-range pork as well. But I would just look harder if you haven't been able to find it. I live in an apartment, so don't think I can have reverse osmosis water filtration. Is it possible to get this to hook up to the faucet? Now, well, you can get a countertop RO filter, Alice. And can we put a link up to that RO filter for Alice? Yeah, we'll put a link up for you, Alice. There's a countertop unit that you can run. As a matter of fact, my son is in an apartment at college right now, and that's what we bought for him. This is the same unit. We'll put a link up to the exact same unit I bought for my son so that he could filter his water reverse osmosis. Possible reason for elevated serum ferritin. So when serum ferritin is elevated, so serum ferritin is what's called an acute phase inflammatory protein. So when you're inflamed, ferritin goes up. And generally the source of the inflammation is in your liver, because ferritin is stored in your liver. So when your liver's inflamed, ferritin can go up. So alcohol, too much excessive alcohol consumption, or multi medications. A lot of people that are on 5, 6, 7 medications don't realize that they're just damaging their liver over time. A lot of these medicines have to be metabolized by the liver, so the more of them you're on, the harder your liver has to work. Beyond that, I've seen gluten elevate ferritin, yeast infection elevates ferritin, mold exposure, environmental mold exposure is a really common cause in my experience of elevated ferritin in folks as well. Is black wild rice good to eat? Well, I would say it's okay to eat if you're talking about, is it gluten-free? It is. Is it good to eat? It's not something I eat. It's not, but I'm not saying it's not something you can eat. I think what is good to one is not necessarily good for another, right? It's all relative. One man's food is another man's poison. But if you're asking me if it's grain-free, it absolutely is. How can you test water or food for glyphosate? Get with a local university who does glyphosate testing and ask, get with one of the professors who runs the labs, and sometimes you can get them and get a hold of the right person, and they can help you get access to testing. There is also online, there's a good company that will test your water at a relatively cheap cost. It's watercheck.com. And you can order a water test kit, and they test for more than just that. They test for a lot of different types of chemicals in your water, so that you can have a better idea of what's in your water. If you're trusting your local municipality to give you honest answers about what's in your water, I'd say that's a mistake. A lot of these local water systems, like we've had a number of cases in my office where the water reports did not match up from the city, didn't match what we did when we did our testing on that person's water. And so the cities, whether or not they're just frankly lying outright or whether they're just incompetent, it's hard to know. But if you're worrying or wondering whether or not your water quality is poor, test it. Watercheck.com. I'm not affiliated with that site. We don't get kickbacks or anything like that, but it's a good place to go get testing done. What can we use to get rid of those harmful chemicals in our food if we can't afford to buy organic food? I would argue that you can't afford to buy organic. I mean, I hear this a lot, but we've crunched the numbers and found that when people buy their own food and cook their own food and don't rely on processed packaged foods, cost-wise, it's pretty comparable. That being said, if you're on a really tight budget and trying to save, I would say the place to save would be other places than your food. Reprioritize where you're spending your money. Again, maybe I'm being pompous and that's easy for me to say, Christina. I'm not trying to tell you you're not managing your money well. I'm just simply saying that if I were young, I was young at one point. I mean, I guess I'm relatively young, but when I was a young man and broke and very little money to my name, I still tried to prioritize organic food with my family. And what we did is we just sacrificed things. We didn't do the expensive cell phones or some of the other things. We just kind of reprioritized where we spent our money so that we could afford to buy organic. Now, what I would suggest is, there are different levels of buying organic. It's a really good website called localharvest.org. And they have, if you type in your zip code, they have a list of like different farmers markets and organic farming co-ops. And so one of the cheapest ways to get organic food for your family, and again, on the cheap, and is Whole Foods. They used to call it whole paycheck because it's super expensive. And I agree that buying organic food from a Whole Foods store, you're going to pay a premium. But going to a local co-op is a lot cheaper. And so look that up, because if you have the availability there locally in your community, you might be able to find things for anywhere from 20 to 50% cheaper, and that may make it a lot more affordable for you. As far as getting the chemicals out of your body, if you're eating them, you'll never get them out of you. Like you're not going to take supplements and keep eating chemicals, and that's going to be an okay solution because you're using supplements to help support your detox pathways. It's you're going to spend just as much money on those supplements for your whole family as you would if you were to try, getting that organic food. So there's not really, to me, the solution is to not be poisoned. Supplements that are good for osteoporosis, I think part of that depends on what you're low in. We talk about osteoporosis as this disease. Oftentimes doctors, unfortunately, mistakenly say that osteoporosis is a disease caused by calcium deficiency, which is nonsense. Now, that's not to say that calcium deficiency can't contribute to bone loss, but bone loss is complex and complicated, and so there are a lot of different nutrients that are helpful for the support of healthy bone, and calcium and magnesium and zinc, selenium, chromium, copper, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin K, strontium, vanadium, boron. These are all super important to make sure you're eating and and for supplementing. But there's not like a miracle bone growth single ingredient supplement that I would recommend as a one size fits all approach for osteoporosis. My team is we're in the process, we're almost there, should have it ready in the next month or so, of a comprehensive bone formula for people that have had a diagnosis of osteopenia or osteoporosis. And so that's got a lot of those ingredients that I just discussed. Okay, so what can we do when Roundup is being used in our neighbors' lawns and then we're walking in the neighborhood with our kids? That's a great question. You're not going to control what your neighbor does. You might, if your neighbor's a reasonable person, you might talk to them. You might engage them in conversation and help them understand why it's a bad idea to put poison on their lawn, because especially if they have animals. Because one of the things that I know, even in my own experience, we had one of our dogs. We had a neighbor put Roundup up. One of our dogs got into their yard, and and then their paws became damaged as a result of being exposed. And so it gave me the opportunity to have that type of conversation. So I'd start with a conversation, but you're not going to control the behavior of others. What can you do when your neighbor's doing that? Well, keep your kids out of their yard. And definitely wear shoes. Is an endoscopy for a biopsy necessary for celiac testing? Man, that's a great question. Here, Sarah, I would say it yes and no, and here's what I mean by that. If you do a biopsy and it's positive for villus atrophy, the next question has to be, well, why do you have villus atrophy? Well, the assumption your GI doctor is going to make is that gluten caused it. That's the assumption. But lots of things can cause villus atrophy. Soy can cause villus atrophy. Corn has been shown in some studies to cause villus atrophy. Sugar can cause villus atrophy. Vitamin B3 deficiency can cause villus atrophy. Antibiotics can cause villus atrophy. Certain blood pressure medications cause villus atrophy. So, when you say, is a biopsy the gold standard for a diagnosis of celiac disease? No, it's an assumptive diagnosis, in my opinion. Now, the gold standard in medicine is that do that biopsy, and if you don't have a biopsy, there's no way that you know that you need to be avoiding gluten. And I'd say that that's nonsense, and it's ignorance. Genetic testing will help you understand whether or not you have a predisposition to react to gluten should you eat it. And to me, that should be the gold standard as to what people should be looking at in terms of trying to make a decision about how to change their diet. The other problem with biopsies is it can take 2 to 3 decades for the damage to be severe enough to identify on a biopsy. You also have the problem with biopsies that they're little tiny microscopic cross sections of the small intestine, which has a surface area the size of a tennis court. So you can take a biopsy and get a false negative, and your doctor's like, oh, you don't have positive biopsy, therefore continue to eat gluten, and it's wrong. It could be wrong. So biopsy, in my opinion, is very tricky and misleading. I've had cases where people have had multiple biopsies that were negative until they weren't, and then they finally get a diagnosis after 10 or 15 or 20 years of gluten damage, destroyed their health. So the biopsy as a gold standard needs to be reevaluated, but I don't think it'll ever happen because I think there's too much money to be made. And the world we live in medicine it's a procedural world. Doctors get paid to do procedure, and your GI doctor gets paid the most to set up several days in his office of doing nothing but colonoscopies and upper GIs, endoscopies and colonoscopies, and that each one he does, and as many as he can do, or she, that's what pays his bills. And so that's one of the reasons why it's a gold standard. That's one of the reasons why they won't look at it intellectually and academically and say this is maybe not, okay, maybe it is a good idea to do a biopsy if we suspect it, but we shouldn't just solely rely on that biopsy as the end-all be-all of the answer, because we can mislead a lot of people by relying on that test that can give us false negatives or not be accurate. Deficiencies associated with impulsivity in children: folate, B12, zinc, and then I would even go a step further and say beyond, there's a lot more than that, but beyond those things, my experience is it's not as much the deficiencies creating the impulsivity as much as it is the food poisons causing impulsivity. Feingold was one of the first to bring attention to this when if you look up Dr. Feingold, he's passed away, but he was one of the first out there saying that food dyes and preservatives were creating attention deficit and impulsivity and hyperactive behavior in children, and his work is fantastic if you want to go read more about that. But it's sometimes it's not what your kids are deficient in, it's what you're feeding them that's contributing to their impulsivity as well. So, maybe you're feeding your kids 100% organic, no processed food. If so, kudos to you. But if you're not, look at that too. What's the best non-fish option to get omega-3s? Eating real food, eating grass-fed, grass-finished beef or bison or wild game. Supplementally, if you can do things like flax. There's some chia and flax that contain pre-omega-3. They contain something called linolenic acid, which has to then be converted to EPA and DHA, which are the two types of omega-3 that are essential. And some people don't do that conversion very well, Alice, so those types of supplements sometimes won't cut it. But again, if you're not tolerable of fish, those would be things I might attempt to do along with grass-fed, grass-finished beef or wild game. I'll go down a little bit more there. Could glyphosate cause Hashimoto's? Yeah, I've seen cases of that being the case when we take people on all organic diets. I've seen cases where people's antibody levels dramatically drop. So I would, I don't know that anybody's published anything on that correlation, Jacqueline, but just my own anecdotal experience practicing have seen that be the case. Let's go down a little bit. So, do nitrile gloves contain gluten or glyphosate? Don't know, but if you feel weird after you've been wearing them, if you feel like you've been gluten and I would just obviously don't wear them. But to my knowledge, I don't know. I would call the manufacturer of the gloves and ask them what kind of materials they're putting in their product. Diagnosed with Epstein-Barr syndrome, what to use for detoxing? Detoxing what? Epstein-Barr is a virus, so you don't really detox a virus. You build the strength of your immune system so that your immune system has the capacity to control it. But if you were diagnosed with Epstein-Barr, first thing I would do is get a second opinion. It's just my experience that most people that have been told they have Epstein-Barr really have bad diets and bad behaviors that are leading them to being more susceptible to that particular virus. Everybody has Epstein-Barr in them. It's not the issue that we don't have it or don't have exposure to it. It's an issue that our immune systems are so broken they don't have the capacity to keep it at bay or to keep it under check. So, you need to ask a deeper question, in my opinion, on Epstein-Barr. If going on a cruise ship, what's the suggestion of the least toxic food and drink to consume? I'd say there are different cruises and different qualities of food on those different cruises. I would say it depends on the cruise ship, depends on the cruise line. Meat and vegetables would probably be the least toxic things, but again, they're going to probably cook that meat and vegetables and cottonseed and vegetable oil and, GMO corn and soy oil. So that's a tough call. I just, I don't know what to give. I don't know what to tell you there outside of taking a food suitcase. I know when I travel like that, I'll bring a food suitcase with me and I'll travel for the fun, but not for the food, so to speak. How can I do a lung detox from environmental toxins? So, one of the best ways to detoxify the body, again, I talked about this a moment ago, Joyce, is not like a specific do this for the lungs, but if you want to detox your lungs, in my opinion, one of the best things to take is NAC, N-acetylcysteine. and about 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams a day, and you can do that for several weeks. It's very safe to do and very supportive of lung detoxification. Isn't it true that a diet that isn't gluten-free could make your body release more calcium due to inflammation? Not quite understanding your question. It doesn't make sense to me. Can melatonin cause migraine headaches as a side effect? It can for some people. I wouldn't say it's a common side effect by any stretch, but I have seen melatonin cause headache in individuals. Kathy wants to know, I'm having an MRI or having MRIs done with gadolinium. Is there any way I can successfully help get this stuff out of me after the procedure? I would use ultrametal detox, Kathy, for probably 4 weeks or so after post-procedure to support your body's ability to bind and chelate those things out of you. That's called ultrametal detox. I'll put a link up for you below if you want to go check that out. And if you do, don't forget to use code MEM20 to save 20% on your order this week. Can your food sensitivity test be covered by insurance if my doctor prescribed it? No, your insurance won't cover food sensitivity testing. They just don't cover it, even with a doctor's prescription. I love that comment. When I eliminated corn, it ended half my problems right away. We see that all the time. Thanks for sharing your experience with that. I'm in a situation where I have to eat things with gluten and it's killing my herniated disc. I don't know how you could be in a situation where you have to eat things with gluten. I mean, maybe I'm just different in my mind stoically, but help me understand what that situation is and I can maybe give you better guidance. But I just don't understand that. I mean, if you're in a situation where the only thing you have available to eat is gluten or you starve, that's different. But I don't know of a place in the world where that would be true. And I even in third world countries. I still can't get my hair to grow back after going grain-free. I'm 66 and think I have pernicious anemia. What is the right test to ask for? I mean, that's too broad of a question. I would say, if you're trying to get your hair to grow back, make sure you're eating enough protein first. We did a whole show on hair regrowth, and that might be helpful too. We'll put a link underneath here for you to tap into that show. If you think you have pernicious anemia, you ask your doctor to test you for pernicious anemia. There are different antibodies that they can test. There's intrinsic factor antibodies and parietal cell antibody tests that can be done to help rule out pernicious anemia in that regard. So just ask your doctors to start with those two. I've heard or read that orzonin does not have the same effect on celiacs as the standard gluten-containing cereals. Is that correct? Not in my experience, it's not, Monica. That's part of why I wrote No Grain, No Pain. I was so frustrated practicing, and this is 20 years ago when I was, I've been in practice now 22 years, and so it's about 20 years ago where I was really frustrated with the lack of response from my own patients when they were going gluten-free. They were going wheat, barley, and rye-free, but not corn-free or rice-free or other grain-free. And so we would find that 3 to 4 months after they made their initial diet change, we would find that symptoms started to creep back in. They would improve for the first several months, and then symptoms would start creeping back in, or other forms of autoimmune disease would start creeping in, and we'd find them getting sick again. And this is how I actually discovered that going grain-free was a better idea. And this is how I actually discovered, the different forms of gluten found in the different types of grains. And so they will tell you, and when I say they, and when you say they, that's probably your GI doctors and probably most of the celiac societies across the planet. Most of those societies are taking money from companies that produce, grain-based products that are full of corn and rice. And most of the gluten-free product industry is junk food. It's garbage. It's GMO. It's full of GMO, glyphosate, corn and rice. It's super cheap to produce, but they charge you an arm and a leg to buy it, and it continues to perpetuate illness to the people who are actually using it. But what we would see is that 3 to 4 month period, we actually gave it a name, it's called gluten-free whiplash, where people would go wheat, barley, and rye free, and then they would start to digress again within 3 to 6 months after changing their diet. And so my advice is, I've just seen it too much clinically. And there are some research studies showing that rice does damage to celiac. So I would say that there's been a lack of research. There needs to be more research in this area. But if you're trying to figure out how to get healthy and you're eating a bunch of rice products labeled gluten-free, you're going to struggle. At least that's been my experience. Some people might argue that, but you can argue it all you want, but my experience is what it is, and I've seen more than 10,000 patients in 20 plus years of practice, and the vast majority of them not the vast, all of them have always done better going grain-free than just traditional gluten-free. And so I'm not gonna dismiss 20 years of experience working with people because some society somewhere wants to argue with me because there's not enough research on corn and rice. But the research that does exist shows that they are inflammatory and that they can create problems. And so that's my opinion on the matter. Good question. Can ozone or acupuncture help to heal autoimmune conditions? I think ozone and acupuncture are good therapies, but if you don't figure out why you have the autoimmune disease, no passive therapies are going to solve your problem. Passive therapies are adjunctive to figuring out why, meaning they can be used to help you, they can be used to expedite your recovery, but they're not going to solve your problem. You have to figure out what is triggering your autoimmune disease. And I can promise you that a deficiency of ozone or a deficiency of acupuncture therapy is not the driving force behind why you have autoimmunity. Should we eat organic seedless grapes? I mean, you can. I'm not going to argue that you can't. If you're allergic to grapes, obviously no. But could you eat organic seedless grapes? Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. My liver enzymes were normal with elevated ferritin. So you can have elevated ferritin with normal liver enzymes and still have a liver problem. We see this all the time. People have elevated ferritin. We send them out for ultrasounds of their liver and they come back with, visual proof of fatty liver and liver cirrhosis and liver inflammation. So liver enzyme tests are good tests, but they're not always accurate. ALT, AST, ALP can help you understand whether your liver is being damaged, but they're not always going to come back high, and sometimes ferritin gives you a better answer. Have you heard of lichen sclerosis? Yes, I have. And if you've got it, you've got to figure out what's triggering it. And there are a number of different things in my experience that can trigger it. Food, chemical exposures, microbial imbalances, especially yeast, and then number 4 would be nutritional deficits. Those 4 categories are what you need to, as you're looking for a good doctor, make sure that good doctor can measure those 4 categories and be objective about giving you guidelines on diet and lifestyle change. Do I recommend eating dried fruits? I mean, I don't not recommend eating dried fruits. I think it depends on the nature of the situation. At home, for example, I've taken a lot of fruit and dried it and canned it because it's my food reserve in case something ever happens where I need backup food. But do I recommend eating a ton of dried fruit mix type foods? They're super high in sugar, and where you get in trouble with them, you can get in trouble with mold if they're improperly stored, but you can get in trouble more, in my opinion, with the high excessive quantity of carbohydrate sugars. Because when you dry fruit, you shrink it, and you can get into trouble. You can eat, what would be a couple of pounds of grapes and a very small amount of raisins, and then overdo your caloric needs and your carbohydrate needs. So I think part of it depends on how much you're eating or consuming. Quantity matters as well. Let's see, drinking distilled water for 10 to 15 years, any long-term consequences? I would just say if you're distilling your water, add electrolytes back to it. You remove electrolytes from, with RO filtration and distillation, you remove electrolytes from the water. So just, add electrolyte back to it. And as far as long-term consequence, I think you'd be fine. What would cause anemia when a person's iron is normal? Denise is asking. So lots of things. Depends on what kind of anemia. There's different kinds of anemias, Denise. If we could categorize basically the three primary types of anemia, you have microcytic anemia, which is caused by iron deficiency typically. You have macrocytic anemia, which is when your red blood cells don't mature and they're too large. And those types of anemias can be caused by B12 and folate and B6 deficiencies. And then you have what are called hemolytic anemias. And these are types of anemias where your blood cells are breaking too easily. The cell membrane around them is prone to rupture. And vitamin C deficiency and vitamin E deficiency can cause these types of anemias. So again, anemia is not just, it depends on what kind of anemia. And those are just some examples. There are more examples of anemia, but those are some of the more common nutritional ones. What foods contain boron? Meat, several vegetables, several nuts. So boron's pretty decently represented if you eat a whole food diet. Could I refresh which proteolytic enzyme to take if it's not for digestion? So if you're talking about just a proteolytic, kind of like a inflammatory support proteolytic enzyme, it's called matrozyme. And let's put a link up to matrozyme for Dee. Thoughts about fulvic minerals? I think fulvic minerals are fine. It's a good way supplementally if you're trying to support your mineral needs. It's a good way to do that. Our council uses Roundup on footpaths to control weeds, but I don't always see when they're doing it, so I don't know when I walk my dog. Ask them. Just say, hey, what are the days that the people come out to apply Roundup, and don't take your dog out on down that path, at least not on that day. I would just say avoid with direct contact, especially. Let a rain come through. Hopefully you have sidewalks that you could also use when they spray. Why do doctors only test for gliadin and not other glutens? Because I don't know. I can't speak for what other doctors do and why they don't do what they should do. Why does the entire medical care system, largely ignore diet and lifestyle as a means to reverse disease? I don't know. I can't speak for them other than they're ignorant about it or they're lazy. It's got to be one or the other. They're either ignorant about it and they just don't know, so they don't talk about it, or they're just lazy and they don't want to talk about it because they don't have faith in you as a human to be able to make those meaningful changes. I've heard a number of behind closed doors. One of the answers that I get from a lot of doctors is, my patient's not going to do all that. I'm like, you're an asshole, because if you're making the assumption that your patient's not going to follow good advice, then shame on you. That doesn't mean you withhold the truth from them and then just pump them full of medicines. That's pseudo-compassion at best. Anyway, don't get me started on that. I don't know why other doctors do what they do. They lack apathy and care. Let's see, is my Ultra B1 soy-free? Yes. I've been eating gluten due to life change, and I've developed varicose veins and spider veins as well as water retention, and don't know the reason. You need to get tested. If your blood vessels are fragile enough that you've developed varicosities in spider veins, you could be lacking certain nutrients. And if you're retaining water, especially in the lower extremity, that could be your heart. There are conditions where your heart becomes weak or your blood vessels lose their capacity to have good strength. And that could be protein deficiency, CoQ10 deficiency, B vitamin deficiency, among other things. And so get tested. Go get nutritionally tested with your doctor and have your heart checked. Make sure you're not developing some type of congestive heart failure or some other issue that would be leading to that vascular change. Is there a list of doctors who specialize in dietary recommendations to help heal from colon cancer? Not one I'm aware of. You know, finding good doctors is like finding good friends. It's the best way I could probably put it. You know, it's really hard to find a good friend, and when you have them, you feel blessed and fortunate that you do. Not all docs are in it for the right reason, and many docs are handcuffed and you know, want to do it differently but don't know how, and so they're just as frustrated as patients. I don't understand this question. What's my option if I was found to be highly allergic to gadolinium? I mean, then you can't do gadolinium. So you do if you're talking about an MRI, like a dye injection where you go get an MRI, then you don't use the gadolinium. You just get the MRI, and that's okay too. The doctors can still image you without the dye. Is omega-3 from seaweed as good the one from fish? No. No plant-based source of omega-3 is going to be as good as the animal-based versions. If we're talking about omega-3, remember we need EPA and DHA, and those are not. Your body has to take the linolenic acid from plants and convert it into omega-3 EPA DHA. So that won't happen from a plant product. That's why the animal products are superior in terms of pure omega-3 fat. So no, I mean, so anyone else have that question about plant-based omega-3? I've had it. I've got vegans in my practice where they refuse to eat fish. And, you know, so we do use the plant-based products. And when we test them, their omega-3 levels are always on the floor, even with the plant-based products. They're just not very good. Their bodies, you know, don't convert those very well. So although it's something as opposed to nothing, it's my opinion that you're not going to get great levels of omega-3 if you're vegan and refusing to eat any kind of animal resource. And again, fish being the best way to get it. Debbie says, my niece has had chemo for colon cancer. Now they say it's back and spread to other areas. I think their approach is not working. Is there a book to read to know where to start? I say if you really want aggressive alternative advice on treatment of cancer, look up Hope for Cancer, HOPE, the number 4, cancer. Hope for Cancer. Dr. Tony Jimenez is doing great things, and they have, I think, 2 clinics they've got, and they're both in Mexico because a lot of the things they do, the FDA will not allow them to do in the U.S. But they do great work, and that's where I would look. If one of my family members were to come down with that, that's where I would take them. Is omega-3 really helpful for pain and inflammation? Yeah, I mean, there are research studies. I mean, I've seen this, you know, my own practice, so anecdotally, yes, absolutely, it's helpful. But even research studies that compare omega-3 versus non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and they work just as well, if not better. Gluten-free whiplash, it's not funny, but yeah, it's not funny. Again, that's why no grain, no pain, and not no gluten, no pain. Is it okay to have non-GMO corn fiber? So, for any of you wondering, this is for Tammy, and for anyone else wondering about corn, if you're asking my advice about corn, run the other way. I don't care whether it's corn fiber, I don't care whether they call it gluten-free, I don't care whether they call it organic, run. It's not a food that you want in your diet if you're struggling with autoimmune disease and you're trying to overcome it. So the answer, no matter what form it's in, the answer is always going to be no, if you're asking my opinion. Can I take GI Soothe if I have hypertension? Where you have to be careful, Cheryl, with if you have high blood pressure is if you do take it, that the licorice can, in some people, not in all, but in some people can elevate blood pressure. So, you just got to keep that in mind. If you take it and you find your blood pressure creeping up, then the answer is no. If you take it and your blood pressure is stabilized, then, then feel free to take it. How to get rid of group B strep in the body. Chronic infections from this bacteria, been taking antibiotics, not taking care of it completely. You got to get your immune system strong. I mean, if you've got recurring infection, well, first of all, here's something to think about, Natalie. I see a lot of people that have been told they have group B strep, and they're asymptomatic, but the doctor wants to treat it anyway. I think that's a mistake. I don't think you treat an asymptomatic thing like that because the price or the cost of the antibiotics can create other issues and other problems, and so you don't want to. You don't want to create those problems with chronic antibiotic use. If you're symptomatic, that's a different matter. I mean, now you have to look at, why is your immune system not capable of defeating or winning this war? And there could be a lot of reasons why that's the case. You could be malnourished. You could have vitamin deficiencies or mineral deficiencies. You could be eating food that's, distracting your immune system from being able to fight the infection. So food allergies or food sensitivities could be, part of that issue as well. So those would be pathways I would encourage you to look down. Omega-3, what if I react? I think I answered that one already. Trial site, man. In PubMed, it says that gluten reactivity occurs in conditions of high retinol in the blood or cholestasis. I would argue that, well, one, gluten can cause cholestasis, so it's like which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did the gluten cause the cholestasis, or did the cholestasis increase the risk for the development of a gluten reactivity? Because gluten sensitivity is a genetic predisposition, I'm of the opinion that if you have the genes and you eat the gluten, all the other factors are irrelevant. Your body's going to find a way to react to that gluten through the immune system if you consume it, if you have genetic predisposition. And everything beyond after that, in my opinion, is less important to focus on. I love this comment. Thank you so much, Ricky. She says, you're the most brilliant, knowledgeable medical professional and nutrition specialist in the USA or anywhere. Thank you. I'm asking for your supplements for Christmas. That makes my heart swell, and it's just super kind of you to say that. I try my hardest, and if you feel like I'm the best one out there that you've heard, that just makes me know that my efforts are paying off. So thank you for that wonderfully beautiful comment. So Hope for Cancer, HOPE for Cancer is Ruth is who I was referring to. I think it's hopeforcancer.com is their website. But Tony, Tony Jimenez, Jiminez, is the name of the doctor in charge. He's the head honcho at Hope for Cancer. You might also check out the folks at Truth About Cancer, Ty Bollinger. They run a good outfit and can send you down a lot of really good trails for understanding better natural options available to approach cancer. Love it. Just mailed your book to my sister-in-law. Hopefully it helps her, Chip. Thank you for supporting and spreading the word. Hashtag save 100 million lives, right? Natalie says, I'm symptomatic when getting tested. Okay, so this is going back to the strep B component. So she says, I'm symptomatic when getting tested. It's affecting my bladder and vaginally. Last time my urine was... Ask your doctor about topical or vaginal antibiotic as a possibility as well. But just my experience, Natalie, and people that have persistent infection that won't go away with antibiotics, you've got an immune system problem. That your core issue is not the infection. Your core issue is your immune system's not strong enough to help you kick it. You know, so that's where I would focus my time, effort, and attention. Look at your nutritional status. Look at look at food reactions and food sensitivities. A lot of times, people, when they quit eating food that their body perceives to be threats, and they start eating well, then their immune systems, you know, take it up a notch, and then they can kick the issue. How to get relief from bacterial colonization and bacterial infection caused by, okay, so I think I just kind of addressed that. How long should I take probiotic to increase the diversity? I think how long should you take a probiotic is kind of a relative question. I mean, it depends on the strength of the probiotic, it depends on the strains of the probiotic, and it depends on what else you're doing, you know, in your body. I would say, if you want diversity of probiotics, here's what science shows. Get a garden and get your hands in the dirt, go play in the dirt, quit being so clean. Now, I know a lot of maybe moms watching this are freaking out when I say quit being so clean, because you've probably spent a better part of your life telling your kids to wash their hands and clean up. Look, hyperhygiene is a very real problem. It's a very real threat to human health. And I'm not saying to go to the airport and lick the doorknobs, or to go to a daycare and, you know, and eat off the floor. What I'm saying is in your own home and in your own environment, there's a microbiome that is unique and that's healthy for you. And don't be scared of it. And don't smother it with triclosan and other antibacterials in the name of godliness as cleanliness. Because what you'll do is you'll destroy your microbiome and increase your risk for the development of autoimmune diseases and cancer. So the best way to have diversity is the research has been very clear on this up to this point, is to have a garden. Go get your hands in the dirt and allow yourself to get dirty and be dirty. Beyond that, eat really good and solid fermented foods if you tolerate them well. Things like sauerkraut would be a good place to start. And, avoid fermented foods where the fermentation is a sugar process, right? Wine is a fermented grape, if you really think about it, and that there's a lot of sugar in that. And then kombucha is another one I don't recommend. But fermented salt ferments, where you're fermenting the vegetables, is a great way to get good bacteria. As far as how long should you take your probiotic, anywhere from 2 weeks to several months is kind of when we're taking people down a path after testing, that's kind of what we do in the practice. My opinion on colostrum. I think colostrum can be very good for you. I think it can be very helpful. The problem with what I've seen in people with colostrum is that they react to it if they're reactive to dairy, and a lot of people that are gluten reactive are also reactive to dairy. As a matter of fact, clinically I've seen colostrum be such a problem in people's recovery, even though I think colostrum is a great product. We actually have 2 products for that reason. One is a colostral-based product called Ultramune IgG, but the other is a non-colostrum product. It's similar in terms of its immune boosting capacity. It's called Immune Shield, and it's a bovine product. It's a serum product versus a dairy product. So, what I tend to do with people in practice is use the non-dairy derivative, non-colostral product. It works just as well in my experience without running the risk of the dairy reaction. So hopefully that's helpful for you. So I don't like to say bad things about it. Somebody's commenting or asking about is X a good product or to take. I don't comment about other companies. There's an old saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I don't comment about other products simply because I don't have an intrinsic knowledge of their factory and what goes on behind those closed doors. Marketing is a very powerful tool that people can be lied to through, as we've all witnessed these past few years. And again, without having the behind the scenes sight of what some of these other companies are doing, it's just not something I'm not going to comment good or bad about their particular products, especially if I don't have any experience using them. Now, if I had experience using them, I could give you a better comment, but I just don't. If high serum iron, if it's caused by, so if you have hemochromatosis, high serum iron, there's not really any micronutrients that are going to help, so per se with that. The best thing you can do is go give blood. Sometimes a couple of times a year, donate your blood. Why does fruit give pain in the joints and migraine headaches? Probably because you have a yeast overgrowth. If I were guessing, fruit. A lot of people that react to fruit have internal yeast overgrowth, and when they eat a lot of fruit, that yeast grows even stronger, gets even stronger, produces a number of toxins that can create pain and headache, and among other things. Like that. Ruth says, we were talking about being too clean, and she says, I dropped an olive at the outdoor market. I picked it up and ate it. I'm still here. I trust my immune system. I do too. I trust your immune system. I trust mine. The 5-second rule. The famous 5-second rule. If it drops on the floor and 5 seconds haven't passed, then it's still fair game to eat. I love this. Geert says, after visiting you a few years ago from Norway with my young daughter who had chronic fatigue, she's now 100% herself again. I have now wrote a book of everything that has happened after visiting you. Thanks. Well, thank you. I love it when people come on and share their experience, experience with me. And I love it when we have these great stories. So thanks for sharing. Tell her I said hi. Can we give blood if we have mycotoxins and other illnesses? I think it's an ethical question. Do you want to give blood if you have illnesses and you're not sure why, and you have maybe toxins in your blood that may transmit into another person? I would question, whether or not that was something that you'd want to do. Now, if we were talking about hemochromatosis a minute ago, and so if you can't give blood or you don't ethically feel like you should give blood, you can still get your blood drawn but just not give it. In other words, a doctor can write you a prescription for blood draws if you have hemochromatosis to reduce your iron load. And that is a possibility. It was a question I think I missed. Go up on the left for me just a little. Somebody asked me about sarcoidosis. Yeah, Terry's asking, what would you do with sarcoidosis? Well, sarcoidosis is an autoimmune disease, Terry, and so just like any autoimmune disease, I think the myth behind autoimmune disease is that there are 140 different forms of autoimmune disease. Sarcoidosis is one of them, and that's the myth, is that there are 140 different ones. It's my opinion that autoimmune disease is not 140 different diseases. Autoimmune disease is a process that occurs, and everyone's unique and different. So when some people have the process of autoimmune disease in their bodies, the way it manifests might be sarcoidosis. For other people, that might be Hashimoto's. For other people, that might be celiac disease. For other people, that might be rheumatoid arthritis. But unfortunately, doctors like to categorize things and sound smart, and then shuffle you around to multiple different specialists, But it's an autoimmune process, so we have to ask the question. So you asked me, what do I do about sarcoidosis? Well, I would test the 4 classes of triggers for autoimmune disease in that individual. I would test them for food reactions, I'd test them for chemical reactions, I'd test their microbiome for microbial imbalances or losses, and I would test them for nutritional deficiencies, because those 4 categories are the 4 primary underlying triggers for why the process of autoimmune disease occurs. And so if you know what those things are, then you can empower yourself to make meaningful changes in your diet and your lifestyle. And it's just been my experience that the vast majority of people that I've seen with autoimmune disease actually can go into remission if they just change their diet and lifestyle and quit taking multi-polypharmacy drugs to try to eliminate their symptoms. But hopefully that's helpful for you. I encourage you to go and find a good functional doctor that you can work with, because the standard of care for that particular autoimmune condition isn't good, and the outcomes aren't great. And the mortality is very real. The mortality risk is very real with sarcoidosis. So you'd want to get that checked out sooner than later using those techniques. Let's see here. Is there a way we can make an appointment with you virtually? Yeah, Natalie, if you're trying to do that, just reach out to my office. We can put our phone number in there for Natalie maybe, and just call. Okay, yeah, we're always over, aren't we? It's 2 o'clock. Yeah, 30 minutes over. Hopefully that 30 minutes was valuable for you guys. I'm gonna go eat lunch and enjoy the rest of my week, and I hope you enjoy the rest of yours. Don't forget, if you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button below. If this information was helpful, leave me a nice comment. Say something nice. And hit that like button. Remember, our goal is to help save 100 million lives, and the way we do that is we don't advertise. We get out there and we mobilize, right? So help me by sharing this information. If you have a loved one that would benefit from it, help them out. Share it. Pay it forward. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next Tuesday at 6 p.m. I've got a great show coming up for you, and then we'll see you again next Thursday, every Thursday at 12:30 for live Q&A. Take care.